All right, welcome back, everybody. Hope everybody enjoyed their break. And so we've got our last session of the morning here with Rowan Sintesi from Hop Studios. Hop is a big name in our community. They do a lot of great things for us and their clients. Lots of add-ons that help grow the community as well and grow Expression Engine. Rowan, I think you've been with Hop for about 1.5 years now. So
yeah,
joining them as a web developer over there. And as you can see by his screen, he is going to talk about Parse Order in Expression Engine. One thing that can cause you to pull your hair out, but once you understand it, it's a lot easier to debug and troubleshoot issues, all that kind of fun stuff as well. So I'm going to stop talking once again, and Rowan, I'm going to let you have it.
Thank you, sir. All right, welcome everybody. I just want to thank you for being part of this event and attending this talk. This session is called, But First, Parse Order in Expression Engine Templates. Who am I? My name is Rowan. I work with Hop Studios, which is a BC-based web development company. I've worked with Expression Engine since the early EE 2 years, somewhere around 2008. Before I got into EE, I had some university-level computer science credits and some decent all-around computing skills. I got into Expression Engine when I built a site for a fitness business called BellyFit that I still run with my wife. I'm mostly self-taught, and I learned a lot while building that site over the years. The site was a great way for me to learn Expression Engine and included e-commerce, subscriptions, and e-learning. EE was the first CMS that I ever worked with, and I really liked it. When building bellyfit.com, I often bumped into some confusing situations trying to do some things that seemed really hard at the time. I was able to overcome some of these issues with workarounds and gradually learn more about how EE works. At that stage, if it worked, it was good enough for me. However, I didn't always understand why things were behaving the way they were. Over the next 10 years, I worked as a freelancer and built a few other sites with different tools. I dabbled with WordPress and Squarespace, but was far more interested in scalability, flexibility, and power that was provided by Expression Engine. I had heard of Hop Studios through the EE community over the years, and I'd used a few of their add-ons. About 1.5 years ago, I was excited to start a new chapter, and I started working with Hop Studios. It's been a new experience to have such a wealth of knowledge at my fingertips. I am really grateful to our team, especially Travis Smith, for mentoring me, keeping me busy, and encouraging me to put this talk together for you. All right, overview. My goal with this talk is to explore this often mysterious topic of how EE templates are parsed. I hope to provide you with some insights and tidbits to help you in your work. I would love to make even a small impact on your understanding of this topic and save you some time and frustration in your own projects. This talk is aimed at intermediate EE developers or someone who has programming knowledge but is new to EE. I invite you to share your knowledge and experience, and if we get something wrong, please let us know. This is a community, and we're all here to gain if someone else's knowledge will help us. So please use the chat and the Q&A to interact. I'll try to check it as I go through. At the end of the talk, we'll have about 10 minutes for Q&A. So if you have questions, feel free to jot them in the Q&A during the presentation, and we can cover them at the end. Here is what we're going to talk about. We're going to describe what Parse Order is. We'll discuss why it's important and have a look at the EE documentation. We'll also introduce Hop's brand new EE6 Parse Order PDF, which we've generated for this talk. We've dug into the ExpressionEngine template code, the EE6 template code, and generated this new tool, which we're excited to debut for you today. We're going to look at some parse order problems. We'll discuss using PHP and templates. We'll look at some examples, and then hopefully answer some questions at the end. Let's dive in. The EE templating engine is quite a powerful piece of technology. It does a lot of things. The code in the templates, when written well, can be really elegant. That's a pretty cool thing. It's easy to get quick results. As a beginner, once I wrapped my head around channels and entries, I was pretty impressed with how much time it saved me to get results on a page. Before that, I was using sort of non-CMS PHP and MySQL. Creating simple pages is pretty easy. Complexity can ramp up quickly when you're working with snippets, add-ons, variables, and caching. All right. So what is parse order? When we use the term parse order, we're referring to how EE reads through your template code, does those things in the curly brackets, and spits out the results. This can be described as parsing and rendering of the template. Technically, the engine parses the code and renders the result, but sometimes these terms are used interchangeably. There are quite a few steps in EE template parsing engine, and different parts of a given template can be used at later stages. Understanding how EE renders your template code is essential if you want to build moderately sophisticated pages. So let's have a quick look at what is on the EE documentation site. So this may be familiar to you. Hopefully it is. So as it goes with most documentation, unfortunately, this page is a little out of date, and we uncovered a few issues in the document while we were preparing for this talk. We currently have a pull request submitted on GitHub, so if anybody's listening that monitors those, maybe you can check that out and look for NEP's pull request. So we won't go into too much detail here, but this is laid out pretty well here with links to all of these items and terms. So definitely check this out. It's a good resource and will hopefully be improved in the next few days or next week. All right, so I'll flip back to our talk here. All right. So we know there's a sequence of things that happens on parse order. The engine will go through stuff and decide what to do and parse it, and we can use stuff later. So can we change the parse order? This might be a question for a developer coming to EE. So EE says you may change the parsing order of plugins and instruct EE to parse an outer plugin first. This is done by adding the parse inward parameter to the plugin opening tag. Using that parameter will tell EE to parse the plugin before parsing any plugins inside of it. All right, so what does this actually mean? So let's have a little look here. So this example was adapted from the EE documentation with a minor correction to get that RSS parser working. Right here, we are using the RSS parser to grab the LS Labs blog feed, which isn't actually LS Labs anymore. It's pointing to the ExpressionEngine blog feed. And we want to limit the length of the excerpt being shown in the feed. So you'll see we have the word limit plugin inside the RSS parser module tags there. So, you throw in the total, we want 35 words, let's test it out. The results on the right, unfortunately, don't really work. So we see the full post, it's not being limited, and we're seeing images and tags, and it's generally not gonna work for an excerpt feed. So what's happening? Word limit's not working. If you are getting discouraged and you want to throw in the towel, maybe you should consider a premium support plan. Just be sure to use my coupon code when you check out. Just kidding. Let's keep trying. Okay, parse inward. So in this example, we have only added the parse inward parameter to the RSS parser. And this instructs EE to parse the outer plugin first, which is RSS parser, which will render that item content tag in the middle inside word limit. It'll render that before it does the word limit. So in this case, this is super useful. Before the limit was running on the unrendered tag, and of course there's not 35 words in there, so it didn't do anything. So as you can see on the right here, this gives us the kind of results we're looking for. We want to have a short excerpt, and we want to cut it off with a little ellipses. So pretty neat. If I was doing this nowadays with E6 or I guess E5, I'm not sure when they were introduced, I would probably do it something like this with variable modifiers. This is just a bonus example because I really like variable modifiers. I want to promote them. Yeah, I would use the limit variable modifier there on item content. It works really well, but it doesn't really tell us much about parse order. So if you don't know about variable modifiers, check it out. Pretty awesome. All right. Now we'll talk about extension hook priority. If you've ever worked with an add-on or done your own add-on development, you might be familiar with extension hooks. There are about 100 hooks in EE that allow developers to modify aspects of the system without hacking the code directly. In terms of the template engine, there are 2 hooks that we should consider. That's the template fetch template and template post parse. So with extensions, there is definitely the possibility, if you have a bunch of them installed, that extensions could use the same hook. And so this can cause conflicts. We are very grateful for the EE developers for thinking about this. And you can set a priority for when an extension hook is called. So you can set basically an arbitrary number. I believe it goes past 10, but from 1 to 99 plus. So if you have a lot, you can definitely sequence them very specifically. So when I was reading about this, to me, it made sense that this was very similar to the CSS term Z index. So think of it like a Z index for timing. I defaulted to saying Z instead of Z, but in Canada, we call it Z index. We're not going to really cover much more about that, but just keep that in your mind for add-on development. Oh yeah, we got some other variable modifier fans out there. That's good. Thanks, Oliver. Okay. So when looking at that big list of documentation here, there's a lot of stuff going on. And some of this is more important than others. And so for me, I'm only really concerned with a handful of them. So this is my kind of like short list of the most important ones that I'm concerned about. So we have module and plugin tags, such as channel entries or word limiter, as we saw in the example before. We've got variables, single and pair, conditional tags, site template variables, global variables like segment and current URL. We have template partials, which used to be called snippets. Personally, I'm a huge fan of snippets. I use them a lot in almost every project I work on. It's just as soon as I'm replicating any kind of code, I'll consider using a snippet to not have the same code appearing twice. Kind of a smart thing to do, and snippets provide a really good way to do that without sacrificing performance. In case you don't know, partials are pulled into the existing template early and are parsed along with everything else in the template. We have template layout tags. And layout variables. We have embed template tags. Embedded templates are separate templates, just like layouts actually, similar, with their own preferences like caching, PHP parsing, access, etc., and they're parsed individually. They're usually parsed late, and every embed tag will be calling a full cycle of this template rendering loop. So the general advice that I've learned over the years and that people have recommended to me is avoid using embeds for the most part, because they do require the EE engine, template engine, to kick off and run completely through the every embed. So if you can get away without that and maybe use a snippet instead, use the snippet. Partial, my bad. And we have PHP code. So we'll get into more about PHP code later. But PHP is super handy because you can parse things before you render your module tags or after, depending on template settings. Yeah, so that's my big list of things that I'm most concerned about when I go through this stuff. But we will move on. Just want to give a shout out to Lo. I don't know if you've been involved with ExpressionEngine, you might know that name. If you've been using EE long enough, or maybe attended a 2010 conference, you might have actually seen this document on the right. So this was a fantastic document, and it was very useful for EE2. Since then, there hasn't really been anything to replace it. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and I think since we're kind of all maturing and we're trying to encourage, I guess, new developers to come onto ExpressionEngine, it is important to understand the history of this platform, this community, and so kudos to Lo. Thanks for your work. So if you've used this over the years, and kind of feel a bit of a gap, I would like to introduce to you, that's a drum roll, the EE6 Parse Order Quick Reference Guide. Travis and Hop Studios, we've been putting together this document, and we're happy to provide it for free. I think Travis has linked it in the chat there. Thank you. And it's taken quite a bit of work to kind of go through the template engine and actually create this document. So let's talk about it. So this guide is split up into 3 sections. So I'll actually show it a little bit larger here for you. Let's see, there we go. So at the top, right here, we have Roman numerals showing steps followed when deciding what template to load and what to do with it. So the middle section, which is the meat of the document, these numbers 1 to 26, these are all the steps from the template engine and descriptions of what's happening. We also have footnotes at the bottom, which are indicated by these little green letters. So if you read something, you can jump down and have a look at the footnote. So we're going to have a little walk through this. So Roman numerals. EE first looks at the URI and decides which template to grab. This is not in its own a simple process, but we're not going to really get into that. There are some other good resources out there to understand how it looks at template, looks at this segments and decides what to show. So at this early stage, it will check permissions and authentication. Can this person view it? Are we allowed to show it? If there's a file, it'll grab the file for the template. And then we run the template fetch template hook. So at this point, in step 4 here, Roman numeral, and I just learned about this yesterday, actually, it's kind of neat. So the engine will actually look for stuff to do in the template. So it'll look for curly brackets or PHP tags. And if it doesn't find any, it serves a static template. So this is super fast. And it's kind of cool if you want to have a template that doesn't have any actual processing to be done on it. It will just serve that up directly and skip everything else. So kind of handy in certain circumstances. All right, moving on to the main section here. First step is to grab site variables, including template partials and global vars. This includes tags like logged in, template, last segment, current path, etc. EE comments are removed here. Partials, aka snippets, and aka global vars, will override variables with matching names, but everything is parsed at once, meaning one variable's output cannot contain the name of another. So when you're naming your stuff, make sure to think about what it is. Do you want to describe it? Is it a partial? Maybe you want to put a prefix. Consider giving things unique names, and you definitely don't want to collide with system variables. So I think there's a whole bunch of reserved variable names in ExpressionEngine. So if you're getting weird experiences with your variables or partials, it could be a naming thing. All right, step 2. The next step renders if in group conditionals. You might wonder how that works with EE6 now that groups are called roles. So do I. If you happen to know if it's any different, pop your comment in the chat there. Step 3, we'll parse segment variables. Then template route segment variables. And number 5, embed variables will be rendered only if the template is called as an embed. So you can call a full template as an embed, any template you want. Obviously, you probably don't want to do that, but sometimes you could hit a template directly. And so that's the case where the embed variables don't exist, so it will be just called directly. So only if it's called as an embed will the embed variables render. Makes sense. Similar with layout variables, only if it's being used by a layout tag, then the layout system will the layout variables render. Number 7, parse error tags and error conditionals. Steps 8 and 9 will parse date string constants and date variables in that order. Obviously, we would want to parse the format global before we process the date if we're using that. Number 10, consent variables. 11, Here, the engine's going to check to see if this template is cached. If it is, and it doesn't need to refresh the cache, it skips to step 18. It's good to know. Step 12. Here, if you have PHP turned on and set to on input, this is where your PHP is going to run. And we'll talk about this in a couple examples later, but kind of handy if you want to use PHP to feed into any other modules or expression engine tags. Step 13, we're going to look at conditionals if the variables are available. And this is pretty interesting for me when I was looking through this, that there's multiple stages that conditionals are parsed. And it's good to know that if a conditional doesn't have all the parameters or all the conditions to check and test against, it's not going to run it. So that's also a good little tidbit for when does that conditional happen? Is it at the end of the whole process or at the beginning? And the question is both. So it depends on if the variable is available. All right. Next, we are looking at preload replace tags, and then 15. So this is probably where the bulk of your template exists, is in these module and plugin tags. So any exp tag is processed at this step, and this is a lot of stuff. So you can see we have a number of footnotes, so I'll read them out. And it's also worth noting this happens outside first, inside last. Aside from plugins, if you're changing that to inverse like we already talked about. All right, any E comments are removed at this step as well. And we got F, more conditionals are processed if available. G, plugins parsed inside to outside unless you use parse inward. Okay, I just repeated myself. There we go. Good, the footnote is there. H, exp tags and the parameters of another tag set get parsed first in most cases. I'll read that again. Exp tags in the parameters of another tag get parsed first in most cases. So that's kind of neat. You can use exp tags and pass them into some other module or plugin. Obviously, there are certain, there's more to determine and research about that, but sometimes that's a very useful thing. I, search tags on a search result page can also be used as parameters of an exp tag. J, redirect in a triggered if no results tag, pair fires immediately when parsed. So if you have an entries loop and you have a no results, if no results tag, that redirect is going to be parsed pretty quickly because we don't want to do a bunch of more rendering and then redirect. So that's clever. All right. Now, we've done the bulk of the exp tags, so on to the output PHP. So if you have your PHP turned on and set to output, this is where the PHP processing happens. 17, if caching is needed here, the mostly parsed template is written to the cache. So there may be some things still to be parsed later, but the bulk of the work is done. And so that's pretty neat to know that the caching doesn't include everything in your template. It's just what's available at that time. 1 second. Looks like Blair has a question there. And Travis has an answer. Thanks, Travis. Okay. Moving on. So we are at the caching stage. So I think we're at 18. So the engine here has one last crack at rendering the conditionals. Footnote F, all variables should now be available. So every conditional should be ready to render here. K, this is still called advanced conditionals in the code, but it isn't just limited to those. 19, layout tags are processed, and this starts a new loop with the layout template. 20, embed tags are next. Each one starts a new loop. And so as I mentioned before, each one of these is going to cycle through the whole process for every embed and layout tags. 21, we're going to clean up unused layout tags, and this hook template post parse runs here. 22. The first remaining redirect tag. So redirect equals in a tag, if no results, tag pair fires immediately when it is parsed. So I think we talked about that previously in number 15. Same thing happens here, I believe. All right, L, we would prefer to redirect before parsing all subtemplates. This is Travis's note, by the way. We prefer to redirect before parsing all subtemplates, but we're sure there's a reason for this. Maybe so you can redirect from an embed that is positioned in the main template ahead of another redirect. So that's a good note there of the order of things. And if anybody has any insight onto that, that's pretty esoteric and obscure. But if you want to geek out for a minute and let us know if you have any insights on that, please do. Okay, 23. We're almost done here. Parse site and global variable template variables. No conditionals allowed. This now includes parsing the output of entry fields, which can mean variations in the final output depending on your version of EE. 24, process style sheet, encode, path, and route tags. 25, add security hashes and act IDs. 26, clean up all the rest of the EE comments. So that is the wonderful parse order quick reference guide that we have created for you. And again, we'll provide a link to that at the end of the talk. Doug didn't know that about caching. I'm not sure which, about the when it's cached or when it checks the template cache. Not sure exactly about that question. Yeah, thanks for the comments, guys. All right, so yeah, we're excited to provide that to you, and I imagine this will evolve, and we hope to keep this up to date as things change. But there you go. That is the document we've created. All right, let's look at some common problems with parse order. So we just looked at how the engine will go through all of your template code and render things in different orders. Luckily, in my opinion, a lot of the big concerns with parse order have kind of been solved by EE developers and add-on developers. And in my opinion, ExpressionEngine 6 is it's actually kind of hard to come up with examples of problems. So we're going to kind of review historically things that would happen that I encountered when I was learning EE. And again, if you have experiences with parse order, things are breaking in EE6, I would be curious to know and look at your code. But for me, this was a challenge to come up with examples of what the problems are. So one common problem is variable name collision. So it used to be more of a problem. Back in EE2, it was possible to have count, total results, if no results tags without prefixes. And this would obviously cause issues if you have nested tags and you're calling the same variable, but which module is that applying to? So since EE introduced grid and relationships as first-party field types, they're awesome. There isn't really much risk of that anymore. You can't really have a no results tag that isn't prefixed now. And all the popular EE add-ons, which are curated now by EE Harbor, they have really accessible prefixing parameters to clarify your code and ensure that you're getting the right information outputted and in your conditionals. So yeah, matrix and playa is just an example, and then there's an example of relationships in grid. You have to use the full field as a prefix, and if you have multiples, you just basically keep adding them with colons in between to look at the grid and the relationship and the grid and the relationship. So you can't really have the same issues that I grew up with back in the day with these variables actually colliding. So just a little quicker, a deeper look at that. So we have at the top here a matrix field. And so you can see a matrix field and a playa column there in line 6 to 17. So they're nested. And you can see that we can assign a var prefix of speaker and album without some letters for some reason. So, and you can see we can call those using those prefixes. So pretty handy. And with the relationships, similar, but we're using the full prefix of that field name in order to show the results. So smart solution to an annoying problem. And hopefully it's something you, if you're new to EE, you won't really have to concern yourself with too much. Kudos to the ExpressionEngine elders here. I just want to say, if you're new to EE, make sure that you send some love and appreciation to the people who've encountered these issues and solved them for you, so you don't have to worry about it. Hopefully your life is going to be a lot easier. All right, so we're going to move on from that, and let's talk about PHP and templates. In general, disclaimer, it is advised to avoid this in almost all cases. I'm just going to say that. When deciding to enable PHP or not, here are some things you can consider. So, some considerations to not do it. So, if you are an experienced developer, you probably will want to create an add-on instead of using PHP in a template. Pretty basic. If you can do it with an existing add-on, obviously you'd want to do that instead of enabling PHP. Can you solve your problem with an embed? Maybe this is a good choice instead of enabling PHP. Is security on your site an issue? Are there multiple super admins? Maybe some of them you don't know. Are there user groups with template editing access? If there are, then you probably want to avoid this as well. Performance. EE has a note on their site that says PHP code in templates is slower than the same code in a plugin and module. I personally haven't tested this, but I trust them. In this case, I think that that's probably accurate. So a good reason to use an add-on instead. Complexity. Are you building a rocket ship or are you building a go-kart? You know, certain things require different plans for how you're going to structure your code. So if it's something complex that needs to be expanded in multiple phases, you're going to want to go for an add-on instead. Maintainability is something to consider. Add-ons will generally be easier to maintain if structured and commented well. And a little caveat on that, at Hop Studios, we've done a number of upgrades. It's one of the things we do. And there's almost always some custom little add-on that was installed by the developer 10 years ago or something that is lingering and obviously is not, you know, easily updated to E6. So in cases like that, you know, if it's a 10-year gap between somebody maintaining your site, you should probably have done more maintenance in between then. But sometimes these little add-ons cause a bit of a headache, especially if they're core functionality to the site. A lot of the times they're pretty easy to update, but it does require maybe a little bit more time to do an add-on update than it would be just to update or revise how a template is handling some things. Time and budget. So if you have the budget to build an add-on, you should probably do that instead of using PHP in a template. And again, that's a scale thing. If it's a big project, it's much preferable to have a custom add-on for your application or site rather than having a bunch of templates with PHP in them. Now let's discuss some criteria that might lead you to use PHP in your template. Reasons to do it. Okay. Are you new to EE? Are you trying to get a hang of things and you don't want to dive into add-on development quite yet? This is a really great way to start working with ExpressionEngine and doing the things you want to do. If you've looked at all the add-ons available and there is nothing that will solve your problem, that's a consideration. If embedding a bunch of templates doesn't solve your problem, it's a good reason to try PHP. If security issues are not critical, as we discussed, so if it's your own site, your own personal blog or something, or there are no other users with template editing access, then this isn't really a problem. Performance. So I put performance over here, and I'll just talk about this for a second. So I have found that sometimes you can solve things with embeds and putting embeds and loops and but you know, as we talked about, we're rendering each embed as a full template engine run. So that can be a bit of a problem, and performance can really start to suck if you're looping and embedding things in, multiple times. So one of the ways that I've used PHP in templates in the past is to actually improve performance, because you can do a bunch of stuff, you can do some queries, you can grab some information, and then you can feed it into an ExpressionEngine tag, and that all happens in one pass of the template engine. So there are definitely performance enhancements that you can gain if you use PHP in your templates. Complexity. Simple to moderate complexity. So yeah, if you're getting past the, show some simple stuff on a page, and you run into issues like you want to do some tabulation or math or collect stuff and use it somewhere else, then this might be a consideration. But you want to obviously avoid, as we mentioned, things that are moderately complex to very complex. Probably need to be thought out, and an add-on would be the way to go. If time and budget are not really a concern, or sorry, if time and budget are a concern, and you need to do something quickly and efficiently and not spend time developing an add-on and maintaining that, sometimes PHP in a template can really solve your problem faster than the alternative. Okay, so with that all being said, just checking out thanks Tom for your feedback. Jared, straight to the EE toolbox folder. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but he's smiling, so that means he's happy. Okay, moving on. So we'll just look at a couple little examples here of PHP. This is a great reason to use PHP. If you just have a simple little problem or you're making some admin template and you want to create a little tool to do something, this PHP is actually really handy. So in templates, if you want to get access to basic PHP functions that aren't natively available in EE, this can be something to consider. So they can tell you about your system, the server, or the client. You can get access to functionality or data that EE doesn't have available. One basic example of many is getting a directory listing. So I'm sure there's some plugin, or somebody could make a plugin quite easily to do this, but for the simplicity of it and the utility of it, sometimes just writing a few lines of PHP, throwing it in your template, this will solve your problems, or get you a long way to solving your problems. All right, we'll talk about parse stage and why you might want to use different parse stages. So as I mentioned, I've done a fair amount of this over the years, maybe more than recommended, but I often found it faster and easier and more accessible than writing it in the add-on. And sometimes, as with all the considerations above considered, it can be a reasonable choice to solve moderately complex problems. Here are two examples of how I use these two parse order stages over the years. Okay, on input. So we're gonna, again, this is just a very simplified version, but we're gonna do some PHP stuff, come up with an array of entry IDs, and then we can feed that into a channel entries tag. So this is a pretty useful way of collecting a collection of things, maybe entries of a certain, that have a certain field in a grid or something obscure that's hard to maybe get at with normal EE tags. You just want to create an array of those, maybe cache that chunk of it, and then you can use that in your channel entries tag. So obviously there's a lot more to discuss on that, but as a simple example, that's the mechanism that I've used this in the past. On output on the right here, so maybe you want to go the other way, where we're generating an array, let's say, of information about an entry, and then we're doing something in PHP with that later. So these are examples. Obviously, there's a lot more ways you can do this, but these are two examples that I've used to handle different problems, and the input or output stage is actually very useful and well thought out. Okay. We are going to move on to a couple examples here. So, got a problem. We have a channel with purchase information, including emails and prices that were paid. This kind of entry would obviously be handled with like a commerce module or Carthrop or Simple Commerce back in the day. But for now, let's pretend that we just have a channel with these purchases in them and the e-commerce system. So the result we want is we want a list of emails, something that's comma separated that we can spit out into a text area and just copy and paste into Gmail, for example. A little report, we want to email these purchasers. We also want to do some math, and we want to know how much money we've made. So we want to get a total of these purchases and spit out the numbers so we know how rich we are. Seems pretty simple. So I would like to give you guys a minute, maybe two, to just consider this problem. And please just rapid fire into the chat with your thoughts on how you would solve this as a developer. So please go ahead and consider this and just jot your pseudocode down for me, or how you would approach this. I'll give you a minute. You didn't know you were going to get a quiz today. And answering Jake's question, yeah, sure, we'll provide this slideshow on our blog on the Hop Studio site. Anybody? Anybody thinking about this problem, or are we? Should I solve it for you? Okay, well, if it's been about a minute, maybe you're working on your results, that's fine. And so we'll just, oh, Travis, of course, Travis, you thought of a new way. Perfect. JavaScript, I thought of that too, but JavaScript, it's interesting, you know. I thought about this with JavaScript too, and I often use different JavaScript libraries to do that kind of tabulation, where you can do sums of columns quite easily and spit the results out and page tables and things like that. But we're not talking about JavaScript. But I guess in the grand scheme of things, in the parse order, JavaScript is the very end. So you could add that to the list of all the stuff. Cliff says PHP on output, arrays and explode. Yep. Okay. We're gonna go through. So I wanted to just include a couple examples, including one that was my first attempt at this, to do it without PHP. So this is my first try. So I wanted to see if I could do this with stash. I knew it was possible to use stash append for the emails, but I really wasn't sure if I could do any math with those stash values. So I tried doing this with an add-on called MX Calc. Didn't work out so good. So as you can see here on lines 10 to 13, so I'm trying to set a value basically multiple times and update it with this MX Calc value. So I tried numerous iterations of this to see, okay, well, maybe it's, set it to parse inward, maybe I need to do something else, maybe I need to change how the quotes are formatted. But this is not an uncommon roadblock when you're trying to merge functionality of two add-ons together and do stuff. As I mentioned, the stash worked pretty well for the emails, no problem there, but the totals didn't work, and there's a bunch of garbage code being spit out there at the top. So half successful. And if anybody knows how to set this MX Calc add-on up with stash, or if you can even do that, I would love to see it. I couldn't get it working. All right, second try. So I found this add-on called Tally. Never used it before, gave it a try. So this example requires an embed, it requires stash, and requires Tally. So Tally's pretty cool, but it relies on an embed to actually do the addition, probably because of parse order. So it probably does all the additions and stores it in some variable, and then on the embed, which is parsed later, I would presume, it grabs the collection of the tallied values and spits it out. A couple more examples. James says, echo this plus that. Yep, that's using PHP. EXP query. That's not a bad idea. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, maybe a little more cumbersome because you'd have to basically replicate and do, I guess, use MySQL to do the addition before you spit it out. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought of that. Okay, so with tally, so we'll just go through this real quick. So on line 9, I'm calling the tag total price, and I'm adding the price of each loop to it, and it's an account value. And so at the end, on line 20, I'm calling this total price embed. And so this worked okay. But as I mentioned, we have an embed and we have 2 add-ons involved here. So finally, we're looking at with PHP. And this is set to parse on output. To me, this seems more organized, quite clean, easy to read, and it works perfectly and provides me with lots of flexibility. So just super quickly, I'm setting the variables to the top, and then I'm adding to the price, and I'm adding to the string. So very straightforward, super logical, in my opinion, in this instance, does the trick quite nicely. And you'll see the results on the left. It's all good there. All right, so that's the little example. So what did we learn from this? We learned that embeds and add-ons can provide solutions, but to me it was a bit fiddly, a bit, messing around with quotes and tags and trying to figure out what fits where, and struggling kind of upstream against how the parse order is working. And obviously couldn't get it working for that first example with MX Calc. So it can be a bit confusing. On the other hand, PHP is real simple, it's clean, and in my opinion, the nicest way to solve the problem without a custom add-on. So there are a little exercise and example. Thanks for your interaction there. We are wrapping up. I think the timing is okay. What have we talked about? So we described what parse order is, some of the history, some of the examples. We've looked at our new E6 parse order PDF, which we'll provide to you at the end. We've looked at some older parse order problems, which are much less a problem these days. We looked at PHP and templates, when to use them, when not to use them, and some examples. Yeah, so that pretty much wraps it up. This covers my talk. I'd love to hear from you if you have any questions or comments about this. Yeah, we can move on to Q&A.
Great talk, Warren. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, I know, especially coming from the ExpressionEngine team, we can only imagine the amount of work that you guys put into that document and that parse order PDF there. So we shared that a couple times in the links as well. If you guys need that again, that's right on Hop's website. And Travis posted that link as well. So definitely go there and check that out. Give them some love and some high fives and some business if you need them for anything. Buy their add-ons, that kind of stuff. Can't thank you guys enough to do that. I've used Lowe's parse order article for many years, but I think it's finally been replaced here. So
awesome. Yeah, well, that's it was a big gap. I think it's a long time to go without a resource like that. So hopefully you guys find it useful.
Yep, and we've been chatting already internally about the PR for the docs. So hopefully I'll get that live probably later today or first thing tomorrow. Obviously a little busy today with this, but yeah, well, hopefully.
Nothing's burning. It's okay, Andy.
No. Again, we want to show our appreciation and make sure stuff like that gets updated as soon as possible. So thanks again for that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, you're welcome.
So I think we got a few minutes. Yeah.
You want to go ahead?
So let's see. I'm going to click on the Q&A. So Blair in the Q&A asked about white space and line breaks, which is kind of an interesting question to have. Where and how in the parser is white space and line breaks and backspace handled? I've had problems making JSON feeds with backspace, line breaks, white space to get formatting correct.
Yeah, that is not something that was illuminated when we did this work. Maybe Travis has an idea on that. I'm not sure. I don't know when the backspacing is handled. I would presume Yeah, if it's like a categories backspace, for instance, it would happen at the end once all of the results are returned in that plugin, I guess. So yeah, interesting. And I'm not sure about white space either. I would imagine that it's handled in a similar way with PHP, but I don't know. Like if you leave a bunch of white space in a PHP file, it doesn't, matter. It gets all kind of shrunk down. But I'm sure that happens somewhere. Yeah, maybe when the comments are pulled out. That's just speculation. Good question.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know I've run into that trying to output JSON before, and really just taking tags or stuff moving underway around, putting it on the same lines, all kinds of stuff to get that to work. Because just like Oliver
had to do that too when you're wrapping the tags on the same line. The code doesn't look great, but you got to get rid of the white space somehow.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm used to that. Nice, like having my block formatting on my code. But like Oliver pointed out, it'd be nice if commented code and templates would just crunch down to 0 characters. And I did. Yeah, I replicated that just now during your talk. I was paying attention, but I was also testing that out. And yeah, when you look at view source, it leaves some white space where not only EE comments are, but also where EE tags are as well.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
So it doesn't completely get rid of that, which probably goes into why when we're trying to do JSON feeds, we have to put everything on the same line. Because otherwise where you have your tag pairs is leaving white space in the output there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So
maybe that's worth, maybe there needs to be a bit of a minifying kind of action on the HTML or whatever the output is to get rid of white space.
Yeah. So definitely, like I was saying earlier today, guys, feel free to open up PRs or feature requests, that kind of stuff for those kind of items if you think they're beneficial. Let's see.
Any other questions or comments? Please fire them into the chat there. I think we've handled the 2 questions, so thanks for those.
Yeah.
I guess we're just answering everything. That's great. Oh, there we go.
Yep, Travis is just taking care of it. So, Come on, Travis, fire off a good question for him. Put him on the spot.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So I think Travis is suggesting a new parameter here, trim equals yes, which is default to no, might be useful in addition to the parser. That's cool.
Yep. James mentioned, would this help low replace add-on? I'm not sure what that's in reference to, James. Low replace add-on is helpful. Times, but I'm not sure exactly where you're talking about.
Maybe he's talking about the white space thing. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
that seems like that should be handled in the engine side rather than wrapping another plugin around something. But
yeah, that's an interesting way to handle that.
If that's what he meant. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, if there's nobody else, I think we'll go ahead and break for lunch. So thank you again, Rowan, for your time. Thank you for putting this presentation together. I can't, again, overstate for all the presenters, the effort that goes into presenting and being a part of this and dealing with the technical difficulty and all that can come up with this. So I think it went pretty smooth, though. And especially for talks like this, we've been taking all of our conference videos and putting them onto YouTube, onto our e-conference YouTube channel. And they're actually going to make their way to ExpressionEngine University as well.
Great.
So we'll do some post-production on this, and it'll probably be a little bit of a delay here, especially so you guys that bought tickets and everything can have at it first, and then we'll share it to the public here later on down the line. So, all right. Thank you, Rowan.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Have a good afternoon.
You too. Talk to you later.